Have you ever felt like a skyscraper, magnificent and solid under the sun, but inside, every joint groans under its own weight, just waiting to collapse in silence? If so, then this story is for you. My name is Arthur. In everyone's eyes, I was a symbol of success and independence. At 35, I was a department head at a large company, the eldest brother who always shouldered every family responsibility, the friend everyone could turn to for solid advice. People called me the pillar, the rock. They admired my strength, my ability to handle all pressure without a single complaint. They didn't know that rock was riddled with invisible cracks. They didn't hear the silent screams inside that magnificent skyscraper. I was living in a gilded cage called excessive self-reliance. This wasn't healthy independence, the kind that stems from self-respect and confidence. No, this was something else. It was a rigid refusal, almost a reflex, to any form of help. It was a defense mechanism I had built around my heart long ago. A formidable fortress constructed from fear and distrust. Society lauded the image of the lone wolf, the one who hunted and survived on their own. And I had blindly believed that myth. I thought that doing everything by myself was the ultimate display of strength. But I was wrong. It was a lie, a betrayal of human nature itself. Biologically and sociologically, we are a species born to connect, to rely on one another to live. That invisible bond is the true source of strength, not proud solitude. The armor I wore wasn't for protection, it was for imprisonment, and I, the prisoner, was slowly suffocating within it. The journey to build this prison began very early. I recall my childhood, not with memories of carefree kite-flying afternoons or games of marbles. My memories are of my mother's thin shoulders, always heavy with worry after a hard day's work, of my father's tired eyes, a quiet man who only knew how to bury himself in work to make a living. I didn't have a proper childhood. I was parentified while still a child. When I was 10, my younger sister fell seriously ill. My parents had to take turns at the hospital. Everything in the house, from cooking and laundry to taking care of myself, was handled by me alone. No one asked, but I knew I had to do it. I learned a harsh lesson very early on. My needs didn't matter, and relying on adults was futile. My world back then had no room for weakness. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for my entire family. Responsibility weighed heavily on my young shoulders, and I became so accustomed to that weight that I considered it a part of my own body. The fear of vulnerability took root from then on. For me, revealing a crack, a hint of fatigue, meant disappointing others, becoming a burden. I feared that feeling more than anything. Then, the fear of rejection inevitably followed. Once, in middle school, I mustered all my courage to ask a close friend for help with a difficult assignment. That friend looked at me with surprise and joked, "I thought you were so smart. Do you actually need to ask for help sometimes?" The seemingly harmless remark felt like a knife plunging straight into my nascent self-esteem. From that day on, I swore I would never put myself in a position to be rejected again. I told myself it was better to do it alone than to endure that shame. Along with that came the fear of indebtedness. Whenever someone did something for me, no matter how small, I always felt an invisible pressure to repay it immediately, even more so. I didn't want to feel indebted to anyone for anything, because in my mind, that debt was a binding chain, an admission that I wasn't capable. Those experiences, coupled with a few instances of betrayed trust, built the final walls of my fortress. I slammed the door of my heart shut, hanging a large sign, "Thanks, I'm fine, I can handle it myself," And the price I paid for this self-reliance was devastating. First came chronic exhaustion. My body was like a machine working non-stop. Every morning I woke up, I didn't feel refreshed, but only a dull ache at the back of my neck and a fatigue that had seeped deep into every muscle fiber. I drank coffee to stay awake, worked late into the night, refusing all offers from colleagues to share the workload. I was proud of my productivity, but in reality, I was burning my own life force. I was a candle burning at both ends. Next came a profound loneliness, a solitude even when I was in the midst of a crowd. I had friends, colleagues, family. They were around me, but no one was truly with me. My relationships became superficial and incomplete. They were like transactions. People came to me for advice, for favors, for support. I was always willing to give, but I never allowed anyone into my inner world. I didn't share my worries, my failures, my moments of weakness. Therefore, no one truly knew the real me. They only knew the strong Arthur version, a role I had played for so long that I had almost forgotten my own original script. I yearned for a genuine connection, someone who could see through my facade and say, "It's okay, you don't have to carry the world anymore." But I was the one who had built the wall preventing that from happening. And then, the worst appeared, a bitter cycle of resentment. I began to feel annoyed with the very people I was trying to help. Why didn't anyone see I was tired? Why didn't anyone proactively ask if I needed anything? Why did every burden fall on my shoulders? I resented them for not seeing my struggle, forgetting that I had deliberately hidden it perfectly. I became irritable, unpleasant. That bitterness was like an acid, slowly eroding my soul, turning selfless help into a heavy, resentful obligation. I was both the hero and the victim in my own story. My formidable fortress began to crack one Friday afternoon. The company was running an extremely important project, and I, as department head, had taken on almost all of the most difficult workload. I had stayed awake for 3 consecutive nights, refusing all support from my team with the excuse, "Let me do it quickly. You're not familiar with this." I believed that only I could ensure everything was perfect. And then, disaster struck. Due to extreme fatigue, I overlooked a critical system error in the final plan. That error caused a major delay, putting the company at risk of losing a lucrative contract. My boss called me into his office. He didn't scold me. He just looked at me with disappointment and said something I would never forget. "Arthur, a leader's greatest strength isn't the ability to do everything alone, but the ability to trust and empower their team. You failed not because you weren't capable, but because you were too isolated." Those words were like a bucket of cold water splashed over me. For the first time in my life, I couldn't find a single word to justify myself. I walked out of my boss's office, feeling as if the whole world had collapsed beneath my feet. I sank into a chair in a deserted corner of the office, burying my head in my hands. The skyscraper within me had finally crumbled. I didn't cry, but a sense of emptiness and failure enveloped me. That was the moment I realized the harsh truth. What I had called strength had become my fatal weakness. Excessive self-reliance wasn't a virtue, it was a disease, and it had just destroyed the career I had spent my life building. Just then, Lily, a new junior employee on my team, timidly approached. She said nothing about work, didn't ask about the meeting. She simply placed a hot ginger tea and a pastry on my desk. Then she quietly said, "I've noticed you've been very tired lately. You don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders, you know. Sometimes, it's okay to let others help you a little." A small gesture, a simple sentence, but it pierced my last line of defense. For the first time in years, my eyes welled up. I didn't refuse. I just nodded and whispered a hoarse, "Thank you." In that moment, a crack appeared in my fortress wall, and a warm ray of light shone through. It was a moment of realization, the first step on the path to healing. The journey to overcome excessive self-reliance wasn't a revolution, but a slow evolution. I couldn't tear down the walls I had built over 30 years overnight. I had to relearn how to trust, how to be vulnerable little by little. I started with incredibly small actions, things I would never have done before. I asked Lily to proofread an important email before sending it. At first, it felt strange, as if I was admitting my inadequacy. But when she pointed out a small typo I had missed, I felt a sense of relief instead of shame. My nervous system, accustomed to being constantly vigilant and self-reliant, was being retrained. Each small action like that was an exercise to help it understand. Relying on others wasn't dangerous. It was safe. I practiced saying no when I felt overwhelmed. Instead of trying to take on too much, I practiced sharing work challenges with my team, not as a complaint, but as an invitation for collaboration. To my surprise, people didn't look down on me at all. On the contrary, they felt trusted and more motivated. My team became more cohesive than ever. I also applied this to my personal life. When a friend invited me to dinner and offered to pay, instead of automatically refusing, I smiled and said, "Thank you, it'll be my treat next time." When my sister asked if I needed help cleaning the house after a busy week, I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, I really do." Importantly, I began to redefine the concept of vulnerability. I had once seen it as a weakness, a blemish. Now, I understand that vulnerability is courage. Courage to say, "I don't know." Courage to admit, "I'm tired." Courage to ask, "Can you help me?" It's not a hole to fall into, but a bridge to connect with others. Without vulnerability, there can be no intimacy, no empathy, and no genuine relationships. Today, I'm still Arthur. I am still a strong, responsible person. But my strength is different. It is no longer the rigid, brittle strength of a solitary skyscraper, but the resilient, flexible strength of a forest. In a forest, each tree stands firm on its own, but they connect through an intricate network of roots beneath the earth, sharing nutrients, weathering storms together. I am no longer a rock. I am a tree, and I am proud of my roots. Roots that are reaching out to connect with those around me. If you are hearing this story and recognize yourself in it, in the image of the solitary skyscraper buckling under its own weight, know that you are not alone, and know that the door to that prison is not locked. The key is in your hand. Start with the smallest action. Ask a colleague to review a document. Accept a coffee invitation from a friend. Share a small worry with a loved one. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And perhaps, the first step on your path to healing is simply a sentence, a courageous whisper that breaks the silence. "Can you give me a hand?"